Hi everybody. Throughout this class I'm going to show you a bunch of important stuff about the graph editor. And I'm not quite going to cover everything, but I will cover most of it, including stuff that will give you a solid foundational understanding of how it works, and lots of other stuff that I use most often and think is most useful for other animators. And in this video I'm going to start with the basics. So first thing I'm going to do is draw your attention to this thing that I made. I call it the axis cube. And it's just a cube with the color-coded axes in it, the Y, the X, and the Z. And when I select the controller, you can see that the name shows up over here in the channel box and over here in what's called the graph editor outliner. And now with this controller selected, I'm going to put a key on all the channels for the controller by pressing S. And you can see now that I've set a key on these things, these fields are pink. And also the channels that have keys on them show up over here, and the keys also show up here in the graph editor by these black dots. So now if I change the frame, I can move this thing around, and you can see the translation values that I just applied to this show up over here in the channel box. And now if I press S again, you can see I get more keys here at this frame in time that I'm on. And you can see that we'll take the translate Z, that's negative 1.974, and this is the translation Z key. So if I select that, you can see that it's right around negative 2. And you can also go up here to the stats, and you can see the frame you're on, frame 10, and you can get the exact value of where the key is, which is the same as this. Now I'm going to go up here again and change the Z value, put it at about negative 4, but you can see that this key hasn't changed. But it will change if I press S to confirm that I want to save that updated key value. If I was to move it, but not save the change, as you can see here, and then if I change the frame, it forgets the change that I made. It ignores it, basically. So then it goes right back to where it was. And personally, I don't like that, so I turn on auto key, which you can do by pressing this button. When it's on, it's red. And when auto key is on, if you make a change, it records it as you make the change, and you don't actually have to press S. And another way you can adjust values is to select what you want in the channel box. Then you can go over here, middle mouse drag side to side, and you can see the scale of the cube is changing, the numbers are changing in the channel box, and the value of the key got adjusted. But I'm going to undo that. And you can see that these arrows I've been using so far to translate this thing around are parallel to the axis that they're moving in. But if I switch into rotation mode, you'll see that the Y rotate is perpendicular to the vertical Y axis, and that's because it's rotating around this axis. And same thing with the X, it's rotating around this X axis, and obviously same with the Z. But if you look down here now, you'll see that these rotation curves that just got made are too big to fit in the graph editor. So now I'm going to show you how to reframe things in the graph editor. And to do that, hold down Alt, and then if you right-click and hold and slide your cursor side to side, it zooms in and out. If you are holding Alt, then middle-click and hold. You can slide it around left and right and up and down. If you hold Alt and Shift, then right-click and move up and down, you can scale it vertically, like so. And if you're holding down Alt and Shift, right-click and slide left and right, then it scales horizontally. And if you're holding Alt and Shift and middle click, it slides side to side and is constrained to the axis. Or if you want it to go up and down, same thing, holding Shift and Alt. So that's how you can reframe things manually in the graph editor. If you press F, then it frames all the curves in the graph editor. Or if you just select one of them or a few of them, and then press F, then it frames just the things that you have selected. And F is just a hotkey for frame selection, and it also frames all if nothing is selected. And then you have a couple other things which are also right here, these buttons. So this button is frame all, so if I click that, it frames all. If I click this one, that's frame playback range. So now it's framing the entire playback range up to frame 48. This is frame 48. If I click this one, that centers the view about the current time. So if I click that, then the time that I'm on, frame 10, is in the center. And now I'm just going to go back to frame all. Then I'm going to grab the rotate X curve And you can see over here in the Graph Editor Outliner now the Rotate X channel is highlighted with this box. And if I was to grab different curves, then they would become highlighted with the box relative to their color coding. So that's an easy way to, if you don't know which curve is which over here, you can grab them and you can see, oh, these curves are these curves. So it can help you sort things out. And if you want to only see certain curves over here in the graph editor, you can just select them over here in the outliner. So if I select Rotate X, then the only curve that shows up is Rotate X. If I select a few of them, then the few that I have selected show up. And down here at the bottom of the outliner, you can grab this bar and slide it up to divide the outliner into two. And then you can look at different pieces of the list at the same time. So if it's a really long list, it's helpful because I could be looking at stuff up at the top, I can grab those, then I can go to a different part of the list and grab different things, and then they all show up over here. And you can do the standard selection stuff. If you select the top one, then hold Shift and select something below it. It selects everything in between. You can hold Control to deselect things or to select additional things. So that's how you can arrange or choose what is actually showing up here. And that can be helpful because sometimes there's a whole lot of curves and you just want to focus on certain ones. That's how you do it. And the only reason anything's showing up down here at all is because the controller related to this stuff is selected. So if I deselect the controller, then all this stuff goes away. But if I want to keep some of this stuff even when the controller's not selected, or even if I had a different controller selected, I can do that by using these little pins. And if I click on them, then you can see the icons change. And that doesn't affect the functionality down here at all while the controller's selected. So everything I went over still applies. This doesn't change anything. This only has an effect when I deselect the controller. Now you can see that they're still pinned in the outliner. And now everything still works the same way. I can isolate one of them. I can select it and it shows up. It's highlighted over here. So it still works the same way. And then if I select it again, I can unpin them and it's back to normal. And if you just have one or a few selected, and if you set a key, it'll show up here on the ones you have selected, but be careful because it's also going to set a key on everything else that wasn't visible at the time. And if you actually just want to set a key on one curve or a couple of curves, you can go up here into the channel box, and if I want to set a key only on Rotate X, I could select Rotate X, right click, and then say Key Selected. Or I could select a few things, say Key Selected, and I have all the rotates selected, so all the rotates got a key. Or you can also say Key All, and that puts a key on everything. And now I'm going to select the translates, and I'll zoom in on them. And now I'm going to select a key, and I'm going to go into the Translate tool, and I can move the key around, up and down, and left and right. And you'll see that it's snapping from frame to frame, from 7 to 8 to 9. And that's because of this magnet. It's making it stick to full numerical values, actual frame numbers. If I deselect this, then I can slide it between this, which is usually bad because then if I'm scrubbing through in the timeline, when I'm not actually landing on that frame, so or on that key, and it just kind of confuses things. I like to keep my keys on actual whole frame numbers. So to do that, just have this magnet selected. And same thing applies with this one. It's deselected by default. If it is selected, then it steps up one numerical value at a time or down. So I like this one off, this one on. And you can also select whole curves and move them around in the same way. You can select more than one curve at a time. You can select multiple keys from different curves, same thing. And also this thing, this up and down, left and right arrow, is what's enabling me to move it both up and down and left and right. And if you click on it, then the arrows become just left and right, and then you can only move the keys left and right in time. And if you want to, you can actually hold Shift, and then it enables you to move it up and down, but by default, without holding Shift, it just goes side to side. And the same principle applies if you click it again, it's just up and down. Default, it just goes up and down. That way, if you're trying to change the value of your keys and your cursor drifts off to the side, it's not going to change the time of your keys, which is what I prefer. But if you want to change the time of your keys, just hold Shift, then you can move them side to side. And you can also scale keys. So to do that, just go into the Scale tool, and then you can middle click and hold, and the keys that you have selected will scale. And it's scaling from where my cursor is when I begin to click and hold. So it's scaling from here, and if I scale it horizontally, just by dragging to the side, it scales that way from where my cursor started. If I want to scale it the other way, I can start over here, and you can see it's scaling and it's expanding out this way. So that's the principle of how you can scale things. Same thing, you can select multiple keys, multiple curves, stuff like that. And one thing to be careful about is when you're scaling horizontally, keys can end up on fraction frames. And in a later video, I'm going to explain an easy way how to fix that. But right now, I'm going to show you a little more detail on how to select things. So if you have something selected, you can just click or marquee off of it. It becomes deselected. If you marquee around something, it becomes selected. If you marquee around a different thing, that becomes selected. The other thing becomes deselected. And if you want to select multiple things, you can hold Shift and then select a second thing or a third thing. And by holding Shift and selecting something or marqueing around multiple things, it turns the selection to the opposite state. So right now these two are selected, this one's not, and I'm holding Shift. I'm going to marquee around all three, and they reverse. So that's what happens when you hold Shift. If you hold Control and Shift, then all that can happen is that more things will become selected. So the thing that is selected will stay selected, and the things that are not selected become selected. And if you hold Control, then all you can do is deselect things. And to delete things, you can just select what you want and press backspace or delete. You can delete whole curves. And when I do that, watch the value here for the translate Z. It's negative 2.36. I'm going to delete the curve, and you can see the curve's gone now. And it's no longer pink here because there's no keys on this channel, but you can see it retained the value of negative 2.36 because that's the value that the channel was at on the frame that I was at when I deleted the curve, so it retains that. And now I'm going to undo it, actually. I'll bring it back, and I'm going to go over here, and you can also delete things from the channel box. So if I right-click on this Translate Z, I can say Delete Selected, and that will delete the Translate Z keys because that's what's selected. Or I could also say Break Connections, and that would delete it the same way, and Break Connections would also break any connections if, for example, this controller was constrained to a different controller. So basically the same thing, but Break Connections goes a little farther. It'll also break constraints and stuff like that. So I'm going to say, I'll say Break Connections, and you can see it's gone, and it's gone. And this time it maintained the value at 0.662 because that's the value it was at the frame I was on when I deleted it. And there's also this visibility channel, and right now it's at a value of 1, and over here you can see a value of 1 means that it's on. If I click on this and type in 0, then it turns off, and now it's down at a value of 0. And it actually can be somewhere other than exactly 0 or 1, but as long as it's below 0.5, then it's off, and if I bring it above 0.5, then it turns on. And I'm going to turn it off right now because I'm done with the axis cube, and now I'm going to bring in Raymond K. Hessel and introduce you to him. He is the star character from my student film Heavenly Appeals that I made when I was at Ringling College of Art and Design. And I'm going to use him a bunch throughout this class and other classes, but right now I'm just going to click on his foot because I want to point out that different controllers have different channels, and it's not always just translate, rotate, and scale. In fact, this controller doesn't have any scales. It's got translates, rotates, IK-FK blend. I'll explain what that is in a different class, and it's got a bunch of other things that allow his foot to be animated in different ways. So I just wanted to point out that difference between controllers. And the last thing I'm going to point out in this video is that some of the things down here have minuses next to the names. So if I click on the minus, then it collapsed right there, and then it turns into a plus. If I click on the plus, then it expands again, and you just get to see some more stuff. And up here at the top, there's a minus. I can click on that, then everything gets collapsed and is hidden. There's this this plus in the box. If I click on that, then I get a bunch of stuff here that isn't useful, so keep that hidden. And pretty much expand and collapse as you wish, depending on what you want to see. And that's it for this video.